Good morning to everyone who's currently experiencing morning, good afternoon, or perhaps even evening to folks on the other side of the Atlantic. We are glad to be here again with everyone to have our weekly Haftorah Shiur with Dr. Jon Kelsen. Without further ado, Dr. Kelsen.
Thank you very much, Noah. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I don't think there's any good evenings, but who knows? Good to be with you all. I have to note that I am here, as you know, in Jerusalem, and it is a tumultuous, it's been a tumultuous few days here in Israel. This morning in Jerusalem, there were 2 bus bombings at the entrance to the city. You may just be waking up, I suppose, and I'm sorry to bring this news to you, but I'll just share that, and our thoughts are with all those who were injured, and with prayers and hopes for peace in the region. And with that, we return to our Torah study, but we can keep that in mind. Yehuda Amital, I'll just say, if you allow me just to share for a moment, one of the founders of Yeshivat Har Tzion, when he was founding the yeshiva, he depicted, I'm just gazing over here, the hills of Jerusalem, he depicted a yeshiva with windows to the outside world. And he meant that architecturally, but also, I suppose, on the level of values or approach, that the yeshiva should be one which has walls, which is intense, which has structure, which has a culture inside. And if you've ever been to that yeshiva, for example, it certainly does have that, and he's succeeded in that, and yet has windows to the outside world. Primarily in that context, I think he meant the rest of the country, of the state of Israel, and all the goings on there. But more broadly, especially knowing his sort of humanistic tendencies, humanity at large, or the globe at large. So I share that. I'm actually sitting here looking out my windows as I share that, and I'm not sure where people are in your own spaces. I see a window behind Aviva, but we return to the Beit Midrash, as it were, right now. Again, many of you, it's first thing in the morning, but for some not. We return now into our learning, into our Beit Midrash, but with the windows open and with awareness of what's happening outside. Ultimately, there is a hope that Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam. There's the hope, the aspiration. For some, it's a belief. I must admit, for me, it's a hope that Torah study and Torah scholars increase peace in the world. Somehow, that which we are doing increases peace in the world, and with that, let's sort of dedicate ourselves towards that broad endeavor and hope and aspiration this morning with our learning this afternoon. So we are in Sefer Bereshit. We are in encountering Parashat Toldot. We're in an amazing section, and all of Genesis is amazing. As Rabbi Silber likes to say, all roads lead to Genesis. All missions read it, but we're in a particularly dynamic, I would say, dynamic part of the narrative. The stories of Jacob and Yaakov and his brother Esav and his parents Rivka, Yitzchak, and much of the Parashah deals, if you are familiar, much of the Parashah deals with the stories of Jacob and his brother Esav. This is the Parashah. It's not the only thing we deal with, but it's much of the Parashah. This is the Parashah in which Esav sells the birthright to Jacob, and then eventually Jacob receives the blessing. I'm saying this, of course, in tremendous shorthand. We'll return to more depth over this coming hour, and eventually receives the blessing from Isaac, as opposed to Esav, who receives his own form of blessing, but it is not the primary covenantal blessing. Right, Jacob becomes the heir in the chain. So it goes Abraham in terms of the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and then not Esau, but Jacob, but Yaakov, who becomes Israel, and the story continues there. So it's quite a rich parsha. The Haftorah I remind you that our focus primarily has been, alongside learning the Haftorah for its own sake, sort of inquiring into the relationship of the Haftorah to the Parashah, how it could be read as an intertext with the Parashah, as a form of commentary, if you will, or at least a text in dialogue with the Parashah. So the Haftorah comes from Malachi. The prophet Malachi is the last, Malachi. Malachi is the last of the 12 quote unquote minor prophets. They're at least called minor because they are v'trei asar, because they are shorter than the Nevi'im Rishonim, the lion's share, or I should say a disproportionate number of Haftorah come from Nevi'im Rishonim like Isaiah, chiefly Isaiah, but also from others. Malachi is the last of the prophets, actually, according to the ordering of Trei Asar, and relatedly, the rabbis teach that he is among the last of the prophets at all. That's to say that he, with Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, the rabbis teach prophecy ceased from the world, and he's seen as a sort of transitional figure. According to some traditions, he is a member of the men of the Great Assembly, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, so like the sort of prototypical, meaning like first rabbinic, kind of like a Sanhedrin rabbinic body, governing body or legislating body or something along those lines. The Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the men of the Great Knesset, the men of the Great Assembly. So according to some traditions, Malachi is part of those. Part of that group, and it's he seems to have lived or prophesied during the period of the beginning of the Second Temple. So too Zechariah and Haggai and Zechariah, they as well. So we're in the period of the Second Temple, and you'll see that he's commenting and actually critiquing the life of the temple, right? The life of the temple in the Second Temple period, right? And that is the world that he emerges from. The name Malachi, by the way, and then we'll jump in, but the name Malachi, literally the root is malach, prophet, right? So Malachi would be the possessive my prophet. And it's debated among scholars, it's debated in the Talmud, whether that is a proper name, whether his name is Malachi, or whether that is what that means is my messenger, and really his other names, he's associated with, according to some traditions, with actually Ezra the scribe, although some people disagree about that, or I believe with Mordechai or others. So it's unclear who exactly he is. You'll see in the, I kind of like the reading that Malachi is not his proper name, and only if it is, it has sort of literarily, I'd say in the book, it functions not only as his proper name because it's punned upon, or I should say that the notion of my prophet appears several times, or a malach in general appears several times in the book of Malachi, and it makes one, it would be too coincidental if he happened to be named Malachi, and there's no relationship between that and all the references to Malach and my prophet in the book. It's actually a very short book, by the way. So the Haftorah is from the first chapter and to the beginning, I'd say, of the second chapter, the second parak of Malachi. The whole thing is only 3 prakim. So I guess that's a plug for those of you who joined this Shiur, as we said the first time, because you wanted to have an opportunity to engage with Nach more and to learn more Nevi'im. This is a really easy week to learn the Haftorah, and then to finish it up over like a coffee break even, and you can cover the whole book, and it's really interesting. Okay, so let's with that brief introduction, let's learn the Haftorah. I'm gonna, as always, you can either open up on your own browser, or with your own, if you actually have a hard copy of Tanakh. I personally am, like hard copies. So you can open to the beginning of Malachi, chapter 1, or I will also share a screen here. I opened up here. Wait, that's not it. A second, sorry. Here it is. You should all be able to see now from Safari, Malachi, chapter 1, and we'll jump right in. And what I'm going to do this week What we're going to do this week is we'll learn we'll learn Haftorah itself in more or less detail. And then I will pause, or I plan at least to pause. And, we're now a few weeks in, so I think the sense of like the methodology is maybe, I hope it becoming a bit more apparent. And I'll ask you to reflect on how does this seem to be in conversation with the Parashah. If people can just feel free to share. And then I have some thoughts of my own, and we can hopefully build something together. Okay? Everybody good? Rumel, good morning. How are you? I saw you coming before. Now I'm looking around at the gallery. Sherry, Aviv, I see, and everyone else. I just closed the gallery screen so I can only see some of you. And Jennifer, hi. Beth, hi. Okay, good to see you again. Okay, Masa Devar Adonai El Yisrael Biyad Malachi. Masa. Masa is an interesting word to be chosen. To mean, sort of prophecy. It also carries the meaning of burden, right? In some respects, right? That which one carries. So it's sort of this thing that he is carrying. Maybe he is carrying, as Rashi notes, he's carrying the message to the people, but I can't help but feel that he feels like he's carrying a particular burden. It also will come back to that notion, that root of carrying something or lifting something up. I'll say right now, later in the Haftorah itself, it puns on itself, because we'll see reference to the notion of Isa Panim, or of raising up a face, which in the Bible usually means like bestowing favor, right? In the word of God to Israel through Malachi, again the proper name, or through his angel. Ahavti etchem, and here we go right in. It starts with a bang. Ahavti etchem, Amar Adonai. I have loved you, said God. I have loved you, said God. And the notion of God loving us is not new to Malachi, right? Right, we know this from earlier in the Torah already, that God loves us. God loves the Jewish people, and it finds its way into the liturgy as well, right? Ahavat olam, right? Ahavtanu, you've loved us in eternal love, God. Habocher b'amo Yisrael ba'ahava, God who chooses his people ba'ahava. Or think of the blessing of the priests make before they do Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing, right? Ashik Yishem Sovet Mitzvanu, Levarech as Amo Yisrael Be'ahava. Levarech as Amo Yisrael Be'ahava. The reason I mention this is that I mentioned liturgical liturgical mentionings of Ahava, so they tend to come together, apparently, love with two other things. One, chosenness, Habocher b'amo Yisrael Be'ahava, and two, blessing. That's not coincidental with regards, and you can already be thinking, we'll ask you in a little bit how you see the Parashah coming up here being evoked, but it's a little hint, right? You'll see right there that the confluence of those three, love and love being expressed, or being expression of choosing someone, chosenness, and bestowing blessing. So God says, I have loved you, which might have the meaning of, or at least have the connotation of, I have loved you, I have chosen you, Israel, I have blessed you, Israel. Ahavti etchem Amar Adonai. Va'amartem bama avtanu. But you ask, well, how so? How have you loved us? Show us. So this is actually, by the way, what Fishman calls sort of a forensic style phraseology or style, in which you have a statement, then a question, right? So I loved you. Well, how so? God is interrogated, right? Really? Prove it, right? Who among us has not had that moment where someone says, I love you, and you say, really? Bama, how so? I don't see it. And then there's a response. At least this is, I think, the primary way to read this text, where God responds, how have I loved you? But you know that the people are skeptical in some extent, or, well, halo ach esav liYaakov. Here's explicit, by the way, right? Here's an explicit link to the Parashah. Halo ach esav liYaakov. It's not Esav Esau, a brother to Jacob, Ne'om Adonai, says God. Va'ohav et Yaakov. And we'll read it here as the JPS does. Yet, meaning nonetheless, I have loved Jacob. That's the end of the verse. The thought seems to continue, and you can see this in the punctuation of the JPS, where they have a semicolon after brother, Jacob's brother, and then they note that the verse ends after the word Jacob over here where my cursor is, but the thought continues into the next line. Yet I've accepted Jacob, Vahavat Yaakov, ve'et Esav saneti, and have rejected Esau. I'm noting this white space over here if you're looking at the shared screen, because I saw that Rabbi Moshe Lichtenstein in a Shiur he gave on this Haftorah, actually, he really focused on the verse, the breakup of the verses here. I have to admit, it didn't land with me. It's like fully compelling, but it's something I want to share with you, which is that he says, you see that the verse ends that I love Jacob, full stop, and Esav I have hated. So what he wants to argue is that those are two separate thoughts. You would have thought they would come together into one verse, but really what you find here is two different notions. One, loving Jacob, and two, separately despising, rejected, they translate here, rejecting Esau, which opens a possibility that you could have one without the other, that they're not just sort of synonymous, as it were, that you could love Jacob without hating Esau. Remember in the Parashah, Esau says, "Oh my God, this younger guy keeps on tricking me, and he stole. Now he has the birthright, and you know their blessing for me, my father." He cries out, and indeed, his father is able to give him some sort of blessing, but always the younger son, Jacob, where will have the upper hand. As always the case, or often the case in Genesis. So you could have the notion he wants to argue of loving Jacob without necessarily rejecting Esau. That's I'm not based on this, in part based on this verse breakup. Okay, I'll also share that. I should put that out there. I don't know if that's. I don't find that fully compelling for some reason, but maybe you do, or maybe you can do something else with that. Just share it anyway. But we see here that he loves Jacob and he despises Esau, and rejects Esau. If by the way, love connotes, as I'm arguing, blessing and chosenness, then we understand JPS's translation here as if I rejected Esau, because its rejection is the opposite of choosing. Right? So Esau, it's not that he's hated necessarily in sort of the way that we use the term, but he is, or maybe in addition, he's rejected, he's not chosen, he did not receive the blessing. This is what the prophet says. And this is basically, right, God saying to the people, right, I have loved you, right, and I'll prove it to you. I've loved you because I chose Jacob, right? I chose Jacob, and you are descendants of Jacob. And maybe the idea is the fact that I chose Jacob instead of Esau, is itself an expression of sort of gracious love. Because you are sort of lucky that you readers of this Haftorah you recipients, I should say, that you received the blessing, that you are on the side of the one who was chosen, your descendants of the one who was chosen. So et Esav saneti vasimat harav shemama vet nachlato l'tanot midbar. And God says, I have rejected Esau and I have made his hills a desolation, his territory a home for the beasts of the field. And Edom, actually, if they think, though crushed, remember that Israel has their temple rebuilt. So God says, no, Hema yivnu ba'ani haros. They may build, but I will tear it down. And they will be called the region of Rish'ah. This might be, again, as Fishing pointed out, a sort of inversion of the letters for Seir, right? The other name for Esav, and where Esav actually ends up. So it says, you're not be Gevul Seir, you'll be called Gevul Rish'ah, right? The region of wickedness. This is hard to read. I don't know where you're all coming from, I guess, philosophically, theologically, ideologically, but, the notion of chosenness and rejection of the other is a troubled one, I would say, or a troublesome one, a complicated one. And here the notion that in order for Jacob to be loved, to receive his love, to sort of get it, he has to experience Esav as totally despised and and though they may build, I will tear it down. Damned forever. Ha'am asher za'am Adonai, that God has sort of rejected forever. Adolam is certainly a harsh one, though one may understand, depending on the historical period, etc., right, why a given period, Israel would sort of benefit from hearing that message. Remember that in the rabbinic tradition, right, Edom is seen as the precursor, the progenitors for Rome, and then eventually, by extension, into Christianity. In any event, your eyes shall see, and you'll see, God is great beyond the borders of Israel. Now, that's the first section of the Haftorah. Section 2. After saying that, right? After stating that I have loved you and chosen you, rejected Esau quite harshly and definitively, we get to the following, which seems like it pops up without segue. Seems like it's a non sequitur. Ben yichavid av ve'eved adonav. A son should honor his father, or does, but probably should honor his father. Ve'eved adonav, and a servant or slave his master. However, im avad, he says, God, ayi chivudi. But if I'm a father, well, where then is my due, my honor? V'im adoni ani, and if I am a master, ayeh morai, where is my reverence? Amar Adonai Tzavaot, says God, lachem hakohanim bozei shemi, to you, the priests, hakohanim, who are bozei shemi, who scorn my name. Va'amartem bamevazinu et shemecha, and yet you say, here's again that forensic style, and then you say to me, well, how so? So God says in section 2 over here, everybody, by the way, a son really should honor the father and a servant the master, right? These are sort of core relationships in, I guess, sort of patriarchal and hierarchical society. God says, but if I'm those things, if I, after all, am akin to, or if I'm functioning as, or if that's the metaphor we're employing, if I'm your father, master, where is my reverence? And he's talking to the priests. So now we're in the temple sort of mindset. He says this to the Kohanim. And the Kohanim will say back to him, well, how so? What have we done? And he says, the prophet says, God says to the prophet, Magishima mizbechi, verse 7, lecha migoal. You offer defiled food, right? Disgusting food on my altar. And then you'll say, well, how so? How have we defiled you? We're offering sacrifices. Well, it's the following, he says. It's because you say the table of God can be treated with scorn, is scornful. You bring a blind animal for sacrifices if it doesn't matter. You bring blemished animals, a blind animal. You bring a pisech v'cholah ein ra. You say, doesn't matter, nothing bad about that. Would you bring a blemished sacrifice, a blemished animal to your governor, right? Your human, municipal authority? Would you bring it to your techatecha? Hayirtzecha? Would that governor accept you? It says here, hayirtzecha ritzoy, right, is a technical term for already in Vayikra, right? Nirtza, for a technical term for the sort of receipt of an acceptance, I should say, of a sacrifice. That's why at the end of the Seder, we say Halel Nirtza, because it's a sacrificial meal fundamentally based on the Karban Pesach. So we're saying that the Pesach sacrifice and the Seder, by extension, should be received well, right? We should have ritzor. It's in the liturgy all the time, by the way. Right? Accept God, the sacrifices of your people. So anyway, if you bring this a blemished animal to your, to some sort of human authority, or bring it, let's make it into a gift model, for example. If you bring a blemished, beat up old, gift to somebody important that you pulled out of your garage, underneath a couple of crates, would that generate ritzoi? Oh, ha'yisaf anecha, here's yisaf anim, right? Masa devar malachi, right? Oh, ha'yisaf anecha, will he show you favors, God? Of course not. That's what you do here, right? That's what you're doing here. I want to note, by the way, just as a sort of a brief footnote, that what Malachi is doing here is referencing, if you will, Deuteronomy 17, where already Deuteronomy 17, Deuteronomy Yud Zayin, the Torah prohibits bringing these types of blemished animals. I'll read the verse here. I have it in my little hard copy. Tanakh. Do not sacrifice unto God. 17:1. Lo tizbach l'Adonai Elohecha shor baseh asher yiyeh bo, which has any blemish, right? Kol davar ra, right? Anything bad about it, because this is a toeva, right? This is an abomination to God, and there's a prohibition for bringing blemished animals. There it sounds like physically blemished. What's important to note in Malachi is that here he talks about further physical blemishes, the blind animal, or the sick animal, or the lame animal. That's in terms of this verse. However, let me just find the later verse. 1 second. Yeah. Later on, though, in verse 13, this is a brief note, but I think it's an important one. In verse 13, God says that you bring gazul, pisech, and cholah. You bring stolen, lame, and sick animals, and you offer them as mincha. Will I accept you there? So here you see that unlike Devarim and unlike earlier, later on he adds the word gazul there. He adds the word stolen. Okay. For some reason, it's not for some reason, but there are some commentators who see Malachi is focused, primarily on, I guess, what they call sort of ritual or cultic misbehavior or violations as opposed to moral ones. That's not really, it's not fully true. I mean, I guess it's there is a focus here on what we call between being adam lamakom, between God and people, and maybe it's less interpersonal than, let's say, the beginning of Isaiah, but it's not to the exclusion of the interpersonal. Maybe we could call it like the ethical. And I would say actually more than, it's not only to the exclusion of it. Part of his point may be to I would say partially to complicate or to muddy those distinctions to begin with. What I mean by that in this context is when he adds gazul here, the stolen one, and juxtaposes it to the lame and the sick one, right, he seems to be associating those types of problems. Now, two of those are physical blemishes, and one is, I guess, a property right blemish, which you could argue is potentially a moral blemish. In point of fact, in the third chapter of the Talmud, chapter Tzukah, in the chapter about the stolen lulav agazul, this is Sukkah in the Bavli, Sukkah 30a. This verse is recruited, B'havetum gazul. This verse, right, from Malachi, is recruited from our Haftorah, is recruited as the source for the disqualification of a mitzvah haba'aba avera. A mitzvah haba'aba avera. This is the source of Bavli cites this verse, that one cannot do a mitzvah via a transgression. So you can't steal a sacrifice and then offer it to God, right? And you have to do the sacrifice. What I'm going to do, I don't have an animal, I'm going to steal it and then offer it. That doesn't work. That's called a mitzvah haba'aba avera. And the Gemara there even notices that gazul is juxtaposed to the lame and the sick. So just like, and as the Talmud there says, just like you can't fix the lame and the sick, to some extent you can't fix the stolen animal, right? You can't, once you stole it, it has a moral blemish on it. So I would just say that Malachi here, with the backdrop of Deuteronomy 17, and then the earlier verse within Malachi itself, by adding Gazul here, is muddying the distinction between, or at least juxtaposing, right? I'm going to say muddying the distinction between, the interpersonal problem, interpersonal and the, human divine, or the cultic and the moral, if you will, and he juxtaposes them as if to say that they're actually bear a certain similarity. So that's not for now as to get into a little more deeply what the inclusion of Gazul here has to do, the full import of that inclusion. I've written about that elsewhere, and we'll talk about it in another time. But I think it's very, very much worth mentioning in terms of understanding the import of Malachi, just for learning Malachi and seeing what Malachi is doing here, but also I think maybe with regards to our Parsha as well. We'll come back to that in a little while. Let me pause. Any thoughts or ideas, questions, anything? Stop the share for a second so I can look at the whole screen.
I'd like to comment.
Yeah.
I grew up in Israel and I studied some of the prophets in high school, so it's a long time ago. But what I remember is, I think it was Isaiah who said, if you want to love me or praise me, I don't need your sacrifices. I need you to take care of the orphans and the widows, etc.
First chapter, by the way, right? Lama li rosavchem nimar Adonai. Yeah, that kind of phraseology appears in different prophets. Yeah, go on.
So when I read this chapter, it really disturbed me because the God who comes through really disturbed me, and also that saneti et Esav, and how are you? I mean, it just seemed so antithetical also to the Parashah, where Esav does receive a blessing. And when you read the Parashah, you have sympathy for Esav. So anyway, that's all I want to comment, that it's a very disturbing Haftorah.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And I guess what I want to not respond in the sense, what I want to say with you, talk with you is, look, I also, as I think I indicated explicitly, am uncomfortable with the beginning of the Torah, but and yet two things. One is, I'm uncomfortable, and it says what it says, and it's there and it's recited publicly. But two is maybe here I'll since you mentioned it, I'll already jump to the Parsha part, the Parsha connection part, is that as follows. The Parsha explicitly talks about love and hate, right, of different children. Right now, there it's not God who's loving and hating, but in Bereshit in 25, we learn, right, that Rivka loves Jacob, and Isaac loves Esau. It doesn't say they hate the other one, but in other contexts, by the way, like in terms of co-wives, like in Deuteronomy, we talk about the loved wife and the senua. It sounds like the opposite of whatever it means, the hated wife, or maybe it's the chosen wife or the preferred wife versus the second tier, right? Something along those lines, right? So you have that dynamic in the Parsha. And as I said earlier, it's not surprising, right? There's a sense that, it's part of the whole story, that Rivka loves Jacob, and then Isaac loves Esau. And nonetheless, it's Jacob, the younger son, of course, who ultimately is the one who receives the blessing, and is the one who receives sort of the chosenness, right? Who's heir to that. But what I would like to see, what I would like to say, right? You have to decide if what I'm saying lands true with you. But what I'd like to say is that the Haftorah is making an argument about that Parsha, about that story. And the argument that maybe it's making is that it is true that Jacob is loved. That's what the Bible says, right? Jacob is loved, and Jacob receives the blessing, and you, the readers of the prophecy, of course, are descendants of Jacob, Israel, right? This prophecy doesn't go to Edom. However, the prophet is arguing that love is contingent. That love is not inevitably yours. Right? There's a contingency to it. Because as you read further in the Haftorah, we'll see, like even by Ben Yechavid Av, we'll see the notion that, yeah, you may have been chosen, but you have to live up to that chosenness. And if you do not, then you yourself will be rejected in one sense or another. So let me just try to demonstrate that with a little bit of what we've already read. Ben Yechavid Av came out of nowhere, right? A son will honor his father. Devet Adonav. But the thing is that at least in the rabbinic tradition, and maybe you could see in the Chumash itself, Esav is the one who is the sort of paragon of filial piety. He's the paradigm of kibbud av, right? Esav, to the extent that one of the Tanakh sages says, I thought I was good with kibbud av, but Esav is much better than me, right? Because when I take care of my aging father, let's go back to last week, I guess, I put on soiled clothes, he says, right? I guess because he has to, maybe he might get dirty and I don't know what, when I go outside, I put on my nice clothes. But Esav, we see, puts on his, finest garments when he wants to serve Isaac. So Esav is the paragon of this virtue. So when you read Ben Yechavid Av, the Eved Adonav, right? We're thinking, yeah, who's the one who's really the Mechabed of the Av? It's Esav, right? But you guys, Ben Yechavid Av, you're not being, you, Israel, you, the priest in this case, right? The chosen of the chosen, right? You guys are not honoring God, right? And it's true that you bring me these sacrifices, but these are burn sacrifices. And I'm not the first person to notice that in context of the Parashah, that bringing food, right, to someone's table in order to whom you owe filial piety, like your father, right, in order to sort of generate or evoke or to earn, I guess, blessing, sounds a lot like the sons of Isaac bringing him food in order to earn, he's actually blind himself, but in order to earn blessing.
And Jacob brought gazul.
So that's what I was going to say also. I would like to say, yes. Now, the thing is that, unless I missed it, the term itself of gazul, right, does not appear in the Parashah, right? But I wonder, I had the same thought you did, right? Maybe there's something about that something about, there's a subtle critique, if you will, right? There's something that was, God, and this is one way of reading the Jacob story, right? Obviously, another way is that he did the right thing and he deserved it and everything was clean. But another way of reading it is that he did something crooked, right? Akav, right? He did something crooked, and before he becomes the straight Yisrael, right? Yashar, Yisrael, Yeshurun, he did something crooked, and there was something stolen, right? The stolen birthright, at one level or another. Maybe it's both stolen, not stolen. Right? At one level or another, and that's brought, and that sort of vitiates the integrity. It's kind of pogame, right? The integrity of the sacrifice, right? That he's bringing. I think there's an interesting potential proof for this, or at least evidence, which is that we just read this, right? In verse 6 in the Haftorah, God says, "How are you guys, not treating me properly? Because you are kohanim bozei shemi. You're disgracing my name, despising my name." And then you say, "How so?" Well, bozei. Boz, that's not familiar from the Parashah, right? Who was Vayivaz Esav et ha-bechorah. And Esav is the one who said that he despised the Bechorah. So now it's actually Jacob and the Kohanim, right, who are doing the despising. And they're not despising the birthright, they are despising or treating disgracefully God. Okay? And what I want to say is that, so possibly, just to sort of say it like succinctly, it's possible that in this Haftorah, you see the heirs of Jacob, right? Bnei Yisrael, literally, the heirs of Jacob, the readers of this Haftorah, the recipients of this prophecy, who return to the temple, and according to Malachi, are not treating it not treating it properly, are acting disgracefully, are bringing blemished animals, are bringing stolen animals, right, to the temple. And God says, this is not what I want. This will not cause ritzoi. I will not lift up my face to you because of this. And it starts by saying, I loved you and I rejected Esav, but I'm trying to argue, but that love, you are not earning and living up to that love, right? In fact, right, you're actually acting just like Esav in a sense, the one who I rejected, he was despising, now you're despising, right? And remember, he's the one who I said saneti and I, rejected. I mean, I loved you, avato holam avticha, abocher b'aso b'ahava. But in this biting critique of Malachi, you are not deserving of this, and this will not cause me to lift up my face to you. Let me just say two more points, and then Beth, I see you have the hand icon up. So two more points about this. One, with regards to blessing and love and raising of the faces and masa. So Fishbane made, I think, a really, this seems to me a really compelling observation, which is that throughout this Haftorah, I know we didn't get to the Haftorah, but I wanted, since you made that point, Aviv, I want to run with it. Fishbane makes the point that throughout this Haftorah, you see a playing with the language of Birkat Kohanim. It's actually more than a playing with the language of Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing from Numbers. It's actually an inversion of it. Because, Birkat Kohanim, as it go, Yivarecha Hashem Yishmerecha, God should bless you. Ye'er Hashem Panav Elecha v'Yichunecha, God should shine God's face, right, and give you chen, right, be gracious towards you, bestow grace upon you. Yisa Hashem Panav Elecha, should lift up God's face, Yisa, right, v'yasim lecha shalom, and give you peace. And that's why it leads into Sim Shalom Tov. That's why in the liturgy, right, you get into Sim Shalom Tov Al Bracha, right? That's why it's placed there in the liturgy, right, between Ritzei, right, and Shalom. So in the Haftorah, not only do we see God saying, I will not be, raise my face unto you, Hayisaf Banecha, will this cause me to raise my face unto you? But in other areas, occasions, for example, in verse 9, it says, Haftorah Atah, right? They asked for God to bestow favor to them, and later on God says, actually, this won't cause any favor to you, right? I won't actually give, though you may request it, I won't give you any chen as a result of all this, right? So it sounds a bit like the prophet is taking the language of Birkat Kohanim, everybody with me? The language of Birkat Kohanim, and inverting it, right? Rather than it receiving a blessing, you actually won't receive that blessing at all, and more so, it actually will become a form of a curse. This is in, I wrote it down over here. This is in verse 1, 8 to 9. So let's see that. That's what I just read. But this curse, explicit notion of it becoming a curse, yes, is in beginning of chapter 2, right, where God says, "This, if you don't give kavod l'shmi, if you don't shape up, then I'm going to send you curses, and I'm going to aroti birchotechem. I'm going to make your blessings into a curse." It's very explicit. So here it happens literally, because he's taking the blessings of Birkat Kohanim, he the prophet, and making it into, and using it, inverting it into a context of kind of a curse, right? Kind of a damning critique. Right?
Where is the Birkat Kohanim in the Bible?
Numbers chapter 6, is it? Beginning of Numbers. I can pull it up as we're going. Numbers chapter, the end of Numbers chapter 6.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the priests, of course, are supposed to do that. So the priests are supposed to give Birkat Kohanim, but here, as opposed to that happening, the priests are the ones who are defiling the altar. So in short, what I'm trying to argue is two things so far. I'll say one more than Beth. One is that maybe we see here a critique of what happened in the Parashah, right? But also more compellingly or more explicitly, an argument that the blessing and the love and the chosenness in the Parashah is contingent, and the ahava there is contingent. Even though the liturgy says ahavat olam avticha, it's been forever. I mean, okay, but according to this point, it sounds like it's not. I mean, it's not necessarily forever, right? Or it's forever, but it's really problematic when you don't earn it, when you do the wrong thing and you bring stolen and lame, etc., and you defile the altar. That's point number one, how it speaks to the Parsha. Point number two is how it speaks to the sort of inversion of bracha, right? And that happens literally through the inversion of Birkat Kohanim over here, which is especially a critique of the Kohanim, right, who are supposed to be leading the people properly in this return to the second temple, and instead are actually defiling it, right? So God says, I'm going to turn your blessings into curses, and I'm not going to lift up my face to you. It's going to be, right, there'll be burdens instead, right? Then you won't receive any grace. The third thing I wanted to say, with regards to the beginning and the first and second sections of the Haftorah that we started reading, is to make an argument about the rhetorical effect, kind of like the poetics or the rhetorical logic of the Haftorah here, because, and it goes as follows. Sometimes, I learned this from a teacher a long time ago, that he said that sometimes what makes a story a great story, what makes a story a great story, or a great moral story, is when the storyteller opens up by sort of helping the listener lower their guard, right? And then once they lower their guard, once they sort of have buy-in into the narrative and they sort of are in it, then you do something to teach them something. So he talked, for example, about, when Isaiah and other prophets speak about, you have like let's say the Chumash talks about Sodom and Amorah, right, as these horrible places, horrible cities, which are not Israel, right? They're not Israelite, right? This is where Lot goes. Abraham doesn't go there specifically. Horrible things happen there, right? And that's out of the story of Sodom and Amorah come Edom and Moab, right? These other nations over the hills. Okay, so it's like, so if you tell the people of Israel, if you have that story about these others, right? It's like, yeah, they're really bad, and you sort of can, from a distance, right, geographic, I guess, but also like, sort of like psychological distance, you can appreciate the critique, right? You say, they're so bad, they don't treat people well, this, that, and the other. And then you get to Isaiah, it's in the same Tanakh, right? And then Isaiah picks up this thread and says, guess what, guys? You are Sodom, you are Amorah. Kima Sodom hayinu, Kamara damino. You yourself, you guys are actually Sodom and Amorah at some level at least, right? So once you have your guard lowered, right, and you're able to learn about the story about the other, then the story sort of turns it on you and says, and remember the thing you thought we were telling you about them? It's also you. And then you're sort of caught, and then maybe the lesson has a chance of getting into your heart. So I would say here, I want to argue that here the same thing is happening in the Haftorah, meaning the first thing the prophet does is says, he sort of sets up the Israelite listener, the descendants of Jacob listener, and says, like, you're loved, they're hated, they're really hated, they have no hope for return, right? God, anything they build, God will destroy, and that's level one, right? And maybe assumedly because of like, they're not good and they're bad, but that doesn't say that explicitly, just like you're chosen. Once you hear that, then it says, oh, by the way, speaking of love and hate, chosenness and rejection, here's a mirror. Take a look at yourself. Are you so sure that you're living up to your belovedness? Are you so sure that they're the ones who are scorning, and not you? Are you so sure that's only others who steal and such? Don't you steal? Don't you steal as well? Aren't you defiling this altar? And if that's the case, then do not rely upon the blessing. The blessings will become curses. The blessings which you have received in Toldot, can become curses. And this is how Malachi tries to speak to the people. After all, Ben Yechaved Av, it's Esau who's Mechaved Av, not Jacob who's the Mechaved Av, at least in the beginning of the, it's not Jacob ever actually, who was the Mechaved Av. Let me say one more thing, sorry, only one more thing, and then Beth had her hand up for a while, is that the end of the Haftorah, the end of Malachi at large, has the famous line, or the well-known line, Hine Anochi Sholeach Lachem. Actually says earlier, by the way, that I will send my prophet, my Malachi to you. That's again about the name, but it says, Hine Anochi Sholeach Lachem Et Eliyahu Hanavi Lifnei Bo Yom Hashem Hagadol V'Hanora. I'm sending you Elijah the prophet. This is one of those verses that bespeaks or begins the notion of Elijah as like the one who will come at the end of days, right? Who lives on, will come at the end of days and be the harbinger of the messianic period. The last verse of the prophets, V'heishiv levavot al banim, v'lev banim al avotam. And he will return the hearts of the fathers to the sons and the sons to the fathers. And then, of course, Penav, lest I come and I destroy the whole land. So actually the last word is cherem. But then when we read it liturgically, we repeat that line, because that's what we do. We end in good notes liturgically. Hine, right? So it ends with, it starts with Ben Yechaved Av, sons and fathers are not, right? There's no filial piety, there's disruption there. And it ends with the hope and the return of Levavot al Banim, Lev Banim al Avotam, for their repair. Right? Again, it's a central theme of Genesis, actually, right? Remember that, eventually Joseph can come back and kiss Jacob, and also brothers come back together eventually in Genesis. Esau and Jacob themselves can come back together, and the sons of Jacob eventually can be reconciled at the end of Genesis. But it is not an untroubled road along the way. So the lesson taught, right, of Ben Yechaved Av, there's a hope in the Haftorah itself that eventually, will reconcile fathers and sons, and they'll come back together, and also therefore God and Israel. But it's a journey. It requires the prophetic push, and then soul searching. Okay, Beth, thank you for your patience.
I have a couple of points.
Yeah.
First, with regard to verse 6 in Malachi about a son should honor his father.
Yeah.
At the end of the Parashah, Esau has this belated realization that his father does not like Esau's Canaanite wives.
Yeah.
And so he goes and marries the daughter of Ishmael to try to reconcile with his father. The other point I'd like to make is that despite the fact that Adonai Tzivaot has said that God will tear down everything that Edom tries to build, if we think Edom is the precursor to Rome and thus Christianity, this particular threat, prophecy, however we might characterize it, is on a very long arc to fulfillment, because clearly, historically, no such thing has happened in world history. Christianity is alive and quite well.
Right. I guess Rome failed, but yeah.
And my final point is, for me, the rhetorical style that is being placed in God's mouth here in Malachi, I find kind of repellent. The God placing the words of the people in God's own mouth with these rhetorical questions, how have we scorned you? And it's almost like God is mocking the people by expressing it in this particular way. And there's a certain way in which that's almost juvenile. If people spoke that way to each other, the psychological advice of when you're arguing with someone else, you use your I words. You say what you think, instead of saying you. So it's just kind of interesting that we have this rhetorical device that here is being attributed to the words of Adonai Tzavaot. And it just goes to show the various ways in which Hashem is anthropomorphized in the Hebrew Bible, and in ways that are kind of ascribing some of our worst characteristics, as if God has those characteristics too. Dibarti.
Shamati, as they say. Anybody else? Okay, so basically at the end of our time, we only got a few verses in, but I think we were able to cover some of the broader themes here, and make a case for the way that this Haftorah might be in relationship with our conversation with the Parashah, not only which means not only something local and sort of it's not only a textual connection, but the themes that it's dealing with and sort of talking through and expounding upon have very broad import, indeed. We will end actually just by the words of the prophet himself. Is that a Simon and Garfunkel song? The words of the prophet are written on the subway wall. I don't know. So the part of Torah basically ends. The story ends with God saying as follows: I had a covenant with the proper Levi. He describes the proper malach, the proper priest. So we'll end with the depiction of the ideal priest, who is cited in the Talmud actually as the ideal teacher and ideal Rav as well. So this is verses 6 and 7 of chapter 2. Torah emet hayta b'fihu, va'avla lo nimsa b'sfatav. The Torah of truth was in his mouth, and his nothing perverse crosses his lips. B'shalom u'b'mishor halachiti. He walks with me with complete, here they translate as complete loyalty. Say with complete integrity. He's straight, right? Not windy like Jacob, right? Straight, right? Halachiti. V'rabim heshiv me'avon, and held many others from iniquity, right? Helps others. Kisif secho and yishmeru dat, for the lips of the true Kohen preserve and protect wisdom, knowledge. The Torah yivakshu mipihu, and people seek Torah from his mouth, right? Rather than there being avla, iniquity, perversity on his mouth, people come to him for Torah. For the prophet Malachi ends, or not, the Haftorah from the prophet Malachi ends. He malach Adonai Tzavaot, because he is a malach of God of Tzavaot, because this prophet is a malach of God. Okay, so hopefully we can find those people as our own teachers, and hopefully we should have leaders who embody those traits. I'm describing a dream and not a current reality, in my opinion. But that again is me speaking. With that, it's 3:00 my time, meaning it's 8 a.m. your time. Wishing you all a wonderful morning or afternoon wherever you are, and hope to see you again next week. Jennifer, thank you for your note.
Thanks so much. Yeah, my heart is with you.
Thank you.
I have to run. I wanted to say thank you very much. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to join. I'd been wanting to, but I'm in Los Angeles, so it's a little early for me.
So I'm
used to 4:30 services back east that I joined, but 4 I had to keep remembering it's on this day. Get up early.
You are right now up at right now it's 5 a.m. for you.
Yes. But it's a pleasure. It's just I forgot, I forgot, like, whoa, wait, it's Wednesday. I want to come to your Haftorah.
You know what? I really appreciate that, but I am admire and am inspired by how early you got up to learn.
Oh, no, it's very, very well worth it. You're a wonderful teacher.
Really inspiring. Lovely to see you. I hope to see you again. All right.
Take care. I got to run off to B'nai Jeshurun, actually.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kelsen, as always, for a wonderful class, and everyone here for your comments, your participation. It really, really does make our community what it is. Tomorrow, we will have off for the United States Thanksgiving holiday. So to those who are observing, celebrating, please enjoy it. Enjoy your rest. And to those who aren't, maybe a good time to catch up on recordings of Drisha classes that you felt like you might want to jump in on. We still have really interesting things ongoing. So we look forward to learning with you again soon. And again, everyone, please be well.